The Bay County Republican Roundtable is brought to you by Lay's Insurance Agency, a Florida Blue agency, writing individual health plans, Medicare supplements, and group health plans. The August keynote speaker was Dr. John Ward, presenting the truth about COVID-19.
If you'll stand for the pledge, we're going to have Mr. Hatcher here lead us off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Stay standing. Rex will lead us in prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity for us to gather and come together and be in your grace. We hope that you would bless our nation as we cry out to you for your blessings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. For anyone, if this is your first meeting, my name is Phil Bishop. I am president of the Republican Roundtable, and the main purpose of this club is to help, in times like this when we see so much of the usual institutions that we've relied upon for discussion and looking at the ideas that are important to community and civil service. We've seen them being taken over by the left. This is obviously very true in the media, in our culture, in academia. And so it is important now more than ever before for us to be able to build parallel institutions to have these conversations. Because we are dealing with a very important time in our history, and it requires every one of us to be able to stand up for the truth at a time where it is very unpopular to do so. And so that's what we try to do every month here at the Round Table. If you're interested in becoming a member after tonight's event, it's $25 per person. Carol over here can help you out with that. And I think we also have a discount for couples. So every little bit helps. It helps bring in guests, helps us work with the Bay County Republican Party and to do things, particularly now until November, with the most important job of getting Donald Trump another 4 years. So before we start with tonight's special guest, Dr. John Ward, I know we have a few candidates in the audience, so I'm going to give every one of them about 2 minutes to give a little elevator pitch with the primary coming up soon for the last day of election. One last pitch to earn your vote. So we'll begin with Wes here, at the front of the room.
Hey, I'm Wes Hatcher. I'm running for state attorney for our circuit. A little bit about me is I live in Panama City with my wife and our 4 children. My wife teaches for Bay District schools, and my children attend Bay District schools. That keeps us pretty busy. So I've been practicing attorney now for just about 15 years. I practice a number of different areas of law, including extensive practice in the criminal justice system. I've defended cases, I've prosecuted cases, and I've done a little bit of everything else kind of in between. That gives me a unique perspective on what we need to do in order to lead our state attorney's office more effectively and more efficiently than it's been being done. There's a lot of numbers out there, a lot of different statistics that you can look at to see how our criminal justice system is not flowing the way it should be. I would encourage you to look at my website, weshatcherforstateattorney.com, or email me, weshatcherforstateattorney@gmail.com, or look at my Facebook program at Wes Hatcher for State Attorney. There I lay out my platform. I have a vision and I have a plan to get us going back in the right track. And I would certainly appreciate each of you checking that out. If you have any questions for me, email me, call me, my number's out there. I'm more than happy to talk with you about my ideas and my vision for that office. Thank you so much, and make sure you get out and vote. You can vote now, starting now, until August 18th. Thank you.
For Superintendent, we have Judy Vandergriff.
I'm a teacher course. I am Judy Vandergriff. I'm running for superintendent of schools. I've done just about every job in the school system, starting with teacher, assistant principal, principal. Then I was deputy superintendent under James McAllister for 6 years. Then I reached that mandatory retirement age for the state of Florida. It's the number of years. I reached the 35 wonderful years. But I was way too young to retire, so I went to work for FSU, and I supervised student teachers. That's when I had the opportunity to open a charter school. Someone approached me and said, "Have you ever opened a charter school?" And I said, "No, but it sounds very interesting." And so I did, and I opened University Academy. Right now we have 800 students and 1,200 students on the waiting list. I'm sure that you've heard a lot of talk about charter schools and public schools. I worked 35 years in public schools. I love the public school. It was an opportunity for me to do something different, and that's why I did the charter school. There's room for charter schools, private schools, public schools in this county. Let me tell you a little bit about me. I am a fifth generation Bay Countyan. As a matter of fact, my roots go back so far that it wasn't even Bay County, it was Washington County. My grandfather was in the legislature and actually made the motion to succeed from Washington County and become Bay County. So I would never run for an office if I didn't think I was perfectly capable of doing it. I assure you, I am capable of being the superintendent of schools. I urge you to vote. Like Mr. Hatcher said, you've got a few more days. We've been hitting the trail, haven't we? We've been standing on corners and adding at voting polls, and so just to get our name out. It's hard to beat an incumbent, and so we've been working very hard. I would appreciate your consideration. VoteJudy.com, VoteVandergrift.com. That will send you to my webpage and my Facebook page, and that will give you my platform information. Okay, thanks.
I think it's Commissioner Dozier back there. If you'd like to have a few minutes.
Thank you. About that. It won't take me a second to say what I've got to say, or a couple minutes anyway. I'm Bill Dozier. I'm running for re-election for Bay County Commission. When I was first elected, I've been on the board for 16 years now. And when I was first elected, I made a commitment that I would not work anywhere else. This would be my primary job. And that's what I've stuck to. I've not worked anywhere else. And what that does is it frees me up to be able to answer the call. When somebody calls me from Fountain or Phillips Inlet or anywhere in between, I'm free to be able to go and meet people wherever they need to be met and see if I can address their needs, and I will address their needs and see what we can do to help them on the county level. So that was my commitment 16 years ago, almost 16 years ago. And that's still my commitment today, moving into, if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected, that's going to be my commitment for the next 4 years as well. Now, when we go into a situation as a county commissioner of a meeting, what I do is we'll get our agenda, and I'll study the agenda. I meet with department heads, and I get all of my questions answered before the meeting. You will not find me going into a commission meeting not knowing the answer to any question that I have there. I'll say 95% of the time. Something may pop up that I have to ask a question about. But typically, if I ask a question at a county commission meeting, I already know the answer to it. I'm asking the question to get the facts on the record. I want it on the record, so if we ever have to come back, it's in writing, in the minutes, on record. So that's the questions that I ask, I already know the answer to. And so that's worked well over the years, and that's how I'll continue to conduct myself. And I said earlier, I get my agenda, I do my homework. I will meet with department heads way ahead of time. So it's not a surprise at the meeting. These are things that I've done throughout my 16 years as county commissioner. It's served me well, and I believe it has served the people of Bay County well. That's the way I conduct myself in the past, and that's how I'll conduct myself in the future. And I've served Bay County with honesty and integrity over these last 16 years, and that's how I'll continue to conduct myself in the future. And I certainly appreciate on or before the 18th of this month, if you would vote for Bill Dozier. I just left the polls, that's why I look like this. I was there at 6 o'clock this morning. just left to come here to give y'all 2 minutes worth of talk. And so, but I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lenny, would you like to have 2 minutes?
Hey guys, I'm Stephen Linney. I'm not gonna go over there because pretty much same thing. But anyway, I'm running for state representative, right? I'm running against Jay Trumbull. He's the incumbent. He's been in there for 6 years. In 2018, he made the decision to vote for the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Safety Act. This is the reason why I ran against him. To know a little bit more about that bill that he decided to vote for, this bill which was funded by the same group that funds Moms Demand Action, that would be Michael Bloomberg. He has funded a lot of gun control throughout the whole country. So Jay Trumbull made the conscious decision to vote for this gun control, which not only raised the age to buy long guns from 18 to 21, but instituted a 3-day wait period on rifle purchases and the red flag law. And this red flag law is very dangerous, very, very dangerous. Someone could call and say that you are dangerous, and the sheriff's department or law enforcement comes to your house after getting a risk protection order from a courtroom that you're not privy to. They come to your house at whenever they feel like it, and they come there to take your property from you. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that's gun confiscation, right? And all of you are law-abiding citizens, right? You're law-abiding citizens until proven guilty through a court of law. So these people that are having their guns confiscated are law-abiding citizens until proven guilty. In this bill that Jay Trumbull made the decision to vote for, completely violates your rights to due process. I served my country. I've been in the military for 8 years. I joined the Navy in 2012. I served on active duty for 6 years on the USS Louisville, a fast attack submarine. When I joined the Navy, I was 19 years old. I held an M4, fully automatic assault rifle, protecting this billion-dollar submarine. But if I were to return home, I would not be able to purchase a rifle to protect my family. Jay Trumbull believed that it was a good decision to vote for this legislation. Here in this very room, Jay Trumbull stood across the hall and gave us an answer, a 10-minute answer to a simple question on why he decided to vote for gun confiscation, even though his website claims that he is a strong conservative. Well, I will tell you guys today that Jay Trumbull is not a conservative. He is not a true Republican. No true Republican that I know of would ever vote for gun confiscation. And that's why I've made the decision to run against him. A little about me. I work at Tyndall Air Force Base full time. I was in the Navy. Before that, I used to unload trucks for a living. I'm only 27 years old, but I have 2 children of my own and my own wife. And I would like to see the state of Florida be a state that I can be proud of. I want my children to go to school and learn what it really means to be an American and be proud of the country in which they're raised, the country in which they came to. My wife is an immigrant from Japan. We went through the green card process. And I want her family to see our children grow up to be model citizens and not like these Marxists that we have marching in the streets, blocking vehicles and pulling guns on people. So, long story short, I'm very passionate about this. Please, if you have any questions for me, let me know. I'm a straight shooter, a normal guy. I'm not a millionaire. I don't have a bunch of big packs behind me or nothing like that. So if you got any questions for me, let me know. I'll be back here drinking a Guinness. Oh yeah, vote for me on August 18th or before if you can, please. Thank you.
The last candidate is Melissa Suits.
Well, I will join Steve back here in the back of the group, in the back of the room. So I am Melissa Suits. I'm running for state committee woman. So you'll see my name. I am the bottom of the ballot. So I'm starting at the bottom. I'm not a career politician. I don't have any background. It's only 3 years ago that I became interested in local politics, realized that this is really where my vote counts and this is really where I should be paying attention. I feel like running for state committee woman is a good place to start. It's a good place to learn. I'm starting at the bottom. So if you would like a fresh pair of eyes, vote for me for state committee woman for Bay County. Thank you so much.
One more announcement from the Bay County Republican Party before we get to the next speaker.
Run, Debbie.
Okay, hi folks. We are so excited. We had planned there's good news and bad news to everything. We had planned a huge event October 3rd at Aaron Bessett Park. We had it reserved. We've been working for 6 months on the project. Guess what? They canceled their event for the pirate thing on October the 10th. So therefore, we weren't going to get our thing off the ground October 3rd. So we kind of picked up what everybody else is doing, and we have started another boat parade. There was a pretty successful one July the 4th weekend. We were not involved with it, but we piggybacked on top of it. This will be a Bay County Republican Party Trump parade. And as a matter of fact, a very active woman here with the Women's Club, she was in Biloxi. They had one there. They had over 1,000 boats this weekend in Biloxi. So now she's challenged us to get better than that. So you could tell Doug, you could tell your mom that we're going to beat that 1,083 boats that they had in Biloxi. So we have got a lot of work to do. September 19th, we're not only doing the boat parade, but we are going to blow up Shell Island. Well, I shouldn't say blow up. We're going to take over Shell Island. We went out there this weekend. We have got everything going with that. So we are really looking forward to that. We will have it starting about 10 o'clock. More details to follow. We will have 3 hours of fun at Shell Island with bands, whatnot. So this is going to be our big fun thing. More to follow. Please make sure that we've got a good active email address for you. We need everybody out here doing this. This is going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to show the rest of Biloxi even that we know how to do it better in Bay County. Very much.
So with all that out of the way, tonight's special speaker is Dr. John Ward. Obviously, I mean, we've seen this really escalate the last couple of weeks at the amount of pushback on medical professionals that dare question the approved narrative of the media. Bay County has been so fortunate to have someone like Dr. Ward who's used his Facebook page to educate us, to apply his training to the world that we're living in, and to give us, obviously we can't count on the News Herald or any of the local media outlets to do this sort of work. So again, we've been tremendously blessed to have someone like Dr. Ward, who is also the Gators for Trump sponsor at Bay County headquarters for Gators for Trump Walking Stickers. So without further ado, Dr. John Ward.
Thanks so much, Doug, for having me, and really excited to talk about something that I am somewhat passionate about, which is kind of COVID and then what our government response has been, and then answering the questions of how has the government response been effective, where have we gone wrong, and how can we change this for the future, because we kind of submitted to some loss of liberties here, and we need to figure out where to go from here. And we need to tell the government what they need to do, not ask the government what we need to do. So I subtitled this talk, Why Skepticism is Good and We Need a Lot More of It. But now to start, I did want to start with some really good news. Did anyone see the numbers out of Florida and Bay County today? 4,155 new cases, which is the fewest we've had since June the 23rd in Florida. And then here in Bay County, just 7 cases. We haven't had single-digit cases since like early June, so things are headed in the right direction. So how did we get here? So how we got here was all from this 2017 CDC, like how are we going to deal with the next pandemic? And these were the community mitigation guidelines. So I think everyone's actually, oh, you know what, my pointer doesn't work on the TV thing, which is fine. But the community mitigation guidelines, everyone has seen this graphic. This was the graphic that we all saw back in March about flattening the curve. Flattening the curve was not invented with coronavirus. Flattening the curve was actually brought up in 2017. And the CDC said, we need to do something the next time we get a novel strain of flu, because in 2009 we did have a novel strain of flu. And what a novel strain of flu is a new one that we don't have a vaccine for. And in 2009 2009, the Obama administration actually did a pretty bad job of responding to the H1N1 swine flu. And they wanted to make our surveillance system better. And then what they really said we need to do that we didn't do then is we need to increase our reliance on non-pharmaceutical interventions until a vaccine becomes available. So the CDC's strategy for dealing with something that we did not have a vaccine was, let's have people alter behavior until we get a vaccine. And it seems reasonable. And this 2017 paper actually is very, very reasonable. But we didn't follow it. We took a completely different set of actions. So basically, they looked at different pandemics in history, and they said, based on how bad a pandemic might be, we might take certain actions. I did skip the mild pandemic and the moderate pandemic, and I went straight to the severe pandemic and the very severe or extreme pandemic. And they basically took the 1957 Asian flu as the example of a severe pandemic, and they took the 1918 Spanish flu as an example of an extreme pandemic. And then, they basically then normalized for how many people were alive then and what those pandemics would look like as far as deaths go. So a very interesting question is, where does coronavirus COVID-19 fit in when you compare it to other pandemics that we experienced? So here is the data from the CDC effective August 1st of this year, so just 1 week old. So far, confirmed deaths by the CDC in the pediatric population, 45. Okay, so we've had 45 deaths in the entire country, some of which probably aren't from COVID, maybe like with COVID, so, 45 deaths. To put that into perspective, what they consider a severe pandemic, the 1957 Asian flu, it had 6,000 pediatric deaths. I mean, it's not even in the same ballpark. And then the 1918 Spanish flu, in today's numbers, would be 100,000 pediatric deaths. So, from a standpoint of, is this a severe pediatric pandemic? Unequivocally not. Children are, by and large, safe from COVID. And the media misrepresentation of that is disgusting. It has been politicized, and we have been lied to about that. Okay, so now let's look at the U.S. adult population. So in adults under the age of 65, we've had 28,909 confirmed deaths. Comparing that to the Asian flu of 1957, 30,000. So yes, for non-elder adults, this is certainly a severe pandemic. And then where it really has taken a toll are for people over 65. Over the age of 65, we have over 100,000 deaths, up to 113,000 as of August 1st. We all know these are the at-risk populations. These are people who we definitely have to protect and make sure that they can avoid getting it because they don't do as well. But even putting that into perspective, the Asian flu killed 50,000 and the Spanish flu killed 800,000 if you normalize for what the population would be today. Obviously in 1918, we didn't have as many people in the country. This is normalized. So what did the CDC say we should do when it comes to voluntary home quarantine? They said that basically you should voluntarily home quarantine if you've been an exposed household member. So if someone in your house had gotten a really bad flu and or respiratory virus that was a pandemic, you should all stay in your house for the amount of the incubation period, which in the case of the flu is 3 days. And I believe in the case of COVID, it's somewhere to 5 to 7 days. So you could see them maybe saying, okay, if you've got symptoms or if someone in your house has it, don't go to work, stay home and do it for 5 to 7 days. At no point in this very comprehensive article of what we should do in the case of a severe or even extreme pandemic did they do what they really did, which they made us all stay at home. Don't leave your house, okay? If your business is deemed non-essential by the government, shut it down. This policy was pushed by the federal government. It went down to the states. Only 6 states had governors strong enough to say, absolutely not, this is ridiculous, it is wrong. Even our governor, it's the only mistake he has made during the pandemic was caving to the media and calling it a safer at home order, but he did way better than other governors. And the lockdowns, depending on what state you were in, lasted anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks. So that's what we did. The next thing about wearing face masks. Okay, their 2017 report, at which they exhaustively looked at all of the data. They said that the CDC might recommend the use of face masks by ill persons as source control, basically preventing sick people from giving it to other people. But now if you're telling people to stay at home and isolate themselves, would you really be telling them to wear a mask when they're around other people? No, you're telling them to stay home. Now, it did make sense about people who are well. They said people at specifically high risk, like pregnant women, other persons at high risk for complications, like the elderly, or people who are immunocompromised. You might recommend those people to wear masks as a preventative measure. The other thing it says, if you are caring for an ill family member at home, wearing a mask might make sense. And again, so this is what the exhaustive pandemic response guide by the CDC said they should do. So what are we doing? The CDC, for some reason, says every single healthy individual in the United States needs to wear a mask in public indoor settings, which is not anything that has real science behind it. It's just crazy to me. And now in most U.S. states, you're faced with fines or prison sentences if you exercise your individual liberties to not do that. It's very un-American. So, let's go to schools. So, what would the CDC say about schools? Well, during a severe or extreme pandemic, they would recommend preemptive coordinated school closures and dismissals. And this is basically based on the fact that the flu spreads like wildfire in schools. Not without a question. We know this. Schools are one of the #1 places that the flu spreads. But COVID is different. Now, what I will say is in early May of this year, we didn't know that for sure. So would I say it was wrong to close schools? No. But we know for sure now that schools are not places where COVID spreads. In fact, like I said, in the U.S., less than 50 children have died in the entire country, and the mortality is consistent for a very mild pandemic. And then the last thing, this is actually the one area in their mitigation guidelines where the CDC did stick to their own playbook. They banned large gatherings of 50 or more, except for protests, of course. Those are totally fine. And then they did in this paper, they said social distancing should be 3 feet. And for COVID, they've said 6 feet. In Europe, they're saying 1.5 meters. And whether you're in the US or Europe, the appropriate social distancing changes a little bit. But that is the only place where they stuck to their recommended guidelines is there. So, what did they do? They were not Tom Brady. No. Tom Brady knows the play, he knows who he's going to throw the ball to, and he's going to stick to it. They were Jameis Winston. So, we needed Tom, and we got Jameis. All right. So that's what was done. Now let's talk about each of those policies we enacted and look at what the effect of them were. Were they effective? Hey, if we abandon the playbook and we throw a Hail Mary pass and get a touchdown, it's all forgiven, right? But that didn't necessarily happen. So the purpose of the lockdown, we were told, was to slow the spread and to flatten the curve. Basically make it so our healthcare system capacity was not overwhelmed. That was how it started. Of course, then it was like, oh, we need no new cases, all these other things. Oh, we must have contact tracing. We have to have people who can follow everybody so that we can eliminate and have 0 new cases. So, they moved the goalpost on us. But what were the unintended consequences of the lockdown? We had under 4% unemployment in February of this year. It peaked at 14.7% in April. Unemployment that has never been registered in our country before. Our first quarter gross domestic product was negative 5%, and that was with just 1 month of COVID baked in. And then in the second quarter, negative 32.9. Again, totally unheard of, never before in the history of America. And guess why? Because we're not acting like Americans right now. There was an increase in domestic violence and child abuse. There was a substantial increase in beer, wine, and liquor sales, of which I myself contributed to. There was a decrease in preventative health screenings, including cancer screenings. We had an increase in suicide or deaths of despair. And $4 trillion of government spending, and they're about to pass another bill, which is going to be another, how many trillion? Well, what's the number? 1, 2 trillion more? Yeah. I mean, my children are going to be paying for the bad decisions we made this year their entire life. Probably my grandchildren and great-grandchildren will be paying for it too. Maybe they should all speak Mandarin so they can talk to who we're going to have to negotiate that all with. But anyway, did the lockdowns actually work? Well, based on the COVID deaths per million, the states that locked down the hardest, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, had the highest deaths per million in the world. They did worse than Italy. They did worse than Spain. Look at the country that didn't lock down at all, which was Italy. Sweden. 570 deaths per million, which is a number too high. The Swedes admit they did not protect their vulnerable at the beginning, and they had a lot of deaths in their elder homes. But they said they recognized that very early on, and today, with no masks, no lockdowns, single-digit cases in Sweden, single-digit deaths in Sweden. Everyone, including President Trump, who criticized Sweden, should be saying, "I'm sorry" to Sweden, because they have proven they did what should have been done. In New York, you see the lockdown curve. This is deaths per million in New York. In Arizona, Florida, and Texas, we did not lock down. So if our decision not to lock down as our cases went up was wrong, our curve of the 3 states combined, it's not individual, it's our states combined, was about 1/5 of that of New York's deaths. It's again crazy, absolutely incredible. But the media portrays Governor Cuomo like he did the right things. It's almost like he's the Colin Kaepernick of governors. And unfortunately, some countries are doing the wrong policy again. Just look at Australia. Australia was internationally lauded for making such a stringent lockdown that they got their cases almost down to 0. But what they didn't know is viruses are gonna virus. Starting in late June, going on until now, they've had cases increase higher than their first peak, and their second largest city, Melbourne, is now on a lockdown so strict that there's a curfew from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. You're not allowed to go outside of 5 kilometers from where you live, and when you do, it's only for an hour, and you need government papers to show that you're there going through checkpoints. It is insanity, and that's in Australia. And then I know this slide is a little busy, but it's talking about a few different things. The state in America that actually put in one of the strictest lockdowns and even makes everyone still quarantine for 2 weeks if you go there, and this is everyone, is Hawaii. And they're an island. They should be able to beat coronavirus, right? No, viruses are going to virus Hawaii. They've got more cases now by 5-fold than they did with their first little peak back in April. And the lockdown and the making people quarantine in a state where tourism is their #1 industry has been disastrous. Now this is actually just came out this weekend. The public health authorities in the UK wanted to determine just how bad the lockdowns were for Britons. They've determined that for every 3 deaths caused by the coronavirus, the lockdown caused 2 more. Be it alcohol or drug abuse, the deaths of despair, be it missed cancer screenings and missed cancer treatments, be it heart attacks that didn't get treated in the 6 to 8 hour window when it becomes crucial for you to get treatment, or strokes that didn't get treated in the 2 hour window when you need to get treated. The Britons actually have this advantage of a really decent National Health Service. I know it's socialized, so whatever, but they can analyze the data really well. And that is what their data analysis shows, is that the lockdown was almost as bad as the virus itself. And can you believe Gwen Graham? Has she lost her stinking mind? This is her from Twitter yesterday. The only action that will get community spread under control is a hard statewide lockdown. She must have cried at 10:30 this morning when she saw that cases were the lowest in 7 weeks, because some of these Democratic politicians, the only thing they have to say is, we need to lock down. We need to keep our schools closed. We need fear, 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 fear. Be afraid. Give up your liberties. This is what they are wanting, and we need to say, no, the data is behind us. So now, moving on from lockdowns and going to the great mask debate. Do not say mask debate over and over again, because it starts sounding like something else, you know? So, there's really two separate questions when it comes to masks, and a lot of people can't really differentiate the two questions, but they're two independent questions. Question number one is, do masks actually decrease transmission of respiratory viruses? Because you can answer yes to one and no to the other, because the other one is, do laws requiring citizens to wear masks or face fines or prison actually increase compliance?
No.
So, we're going to look at some of those numbers. But we're going to start with, what is the data that was used to actually even recommend that healthy people who are asymptomatic wear masks? Well, it certainly wasn't this CDC paper from their Journal of Emerging Infectious Disease, which looked at 3 different groups of studies of non-pharmaceutical measures for pandemic influenza in non-healthcare settings. A total of 22 studies and 10,000 individuals were looked at. And this is what's key. It's in non-healthcare settings. You can't compare a study of doctors and nurses in the hospital who know how to wear masks with all of the resources they have around them to people who aren't doctors and nurses and have never been told how to wear a mask. But that's what some people are using to justify telling people to wear masks. But when they actually looked at the 3 different sets of studies, because they were a little bit different, so what they decided to do, instead of grouping all 22 studies together, we're gonna take them and group them all together. But they found in all 3 sets of studies that there was no statistically significant improvement in the study group, which was mask-wearing group, and the control group, which was non-mask-wearing group. And this is our own CDC. Coming up in an online report, which will be published in a journal in October, this study of Vietnam healthcare workers looking at cloth masks in healthcare settings in Vietnam actually showed that the risk of infection was higher for those wearing cloth masks versus those who did not wear a mask at all. That's because cloth masks it doesn't have the same level of filtration. They get moist a lot faster. You're touching them more. You're having to adjust them more. So, there's a lot of issues, and especially telling people that cloth masks do anything is dangerous. A lot of older people who should be focused on social distancing or isolating themselves at home feel like Superman when they put that cloth mask on. They have no idea that there's absolutely no data that a cloth mask is going to save you from coronavirus. And now let's talk about the real story behind asymptomatic spread. So the theory is that you might spread coronavirus asymptomatically. And because you're an asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic, you can infect others without knowing. Well, someone from the World Health Organization got into a lot of hot water on June the 8th when she was quoted by CNBC at the conference saying that asymptomatic transmission for COVID-19 appears to be very rare. But this was the technical lead for the World Health Organization on COVID-19. So that was the first sign that something was off. So, and I will say pretty much among all physicians for all illnesses, it's generally, for all viral illnesses, it's recognized that patients without symptoms are going to be less infectious. The more symptoms you have, the chances are you're going to be more infectious. But I will say, we still don't know for sure if asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic spread occurs and what the frequency is and how it compares to someone who's symptomatic. But what I can say is on July the 17th, the CDC surprisingly changed its return to work guidelines from their testing-based guidelines, where it said you needed a negative test before you could go back to work, to symptom-based testing. So why is the CDC saying that it doesn't matter if you have symptoms when it comes to wearing masks, but it matters that you have symptoms when you can go back to work? Any thoughts there? I mean, when they did that, I was just like, wow. And you know, the CDC did try to say, well, you can shed viral RNA fragments for up to 30 days that are non-infectious. Well, maybe the pre-symptomatic, asymptomatic people had non-infectious viral DNA fragments. Maybe they actually weren't spreading it either. So the CDC used one standard for whether you can go back to work, but wants to use a completely different standard for whether you should wear a mask. Now, the good news is there is one randomized controlled trial looking at universal masking during this pandemic. You would think out of all the scientists out there, there would be like 15 trials looking at this. But there was only one brave individual who said, you know what, it is ethical to do this. You had a lot of physicians and scientists saying, well, it's not ethical to ask a control group not to wear masks. How can you say that? There's no proof that them wearing masks is effective. So anyway, this guy, Henning Bungard from the Technical University of Denmark, enrolled 6,000 subjects. The study is completed. It's been completed for about 6 weeks, and the results are pending. 2 weeks ago, a newspaper from Denmark got together and asked Dr. Bungard what he thought about the idea of universal masking in Denmark. Dr. Bungard said the simple rules that currently exist, hand washing, social distancing, and self-isolating if you're sick, are effective because they're easy to remember. He worries that using face masks might lead people to be sloppy in following the other guidelines. Bungard's study on masks is due to be published next month, which is now this month. In the meantime, he says he hopes they don't become mandatory in Denmark. Now, if you were the principal investigator of a study looking at the effectiveness of masks during COVID, do you think you would quote in the paper that you hope that your country doesn't do it? I mean, I hate to say it, but I think it's pretty clear which way this study is going. And here's the deal. When this study comes out, everyone in this room, I will share it on my Facebook page, everyone in this room needs to shout it from the rooftops and revolt and say, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Here's why I'm not doing it anymore. Now, one step back, if you're over 65, you're immune compromised, you're someone who should stay at home if you are in a crowded setting, but healthy adults under 65, absolutely no reason that I've seen in the literature to do so. Yep, 64, 65, I mean, you're right, it's an arbitrary number, but use it as a guide. So, what did other countries do? So the country, we all know what Sweden did. They were awesome. They did nothing. But the Swedes, they're so crazy. They only award the Nobel Prize in Medicine every year. What do they know? Anyway, but Norway, another country that actually did lock down. Norway was worried. I mean, a lot of people were worried in March. We didn't know what we know now. But in July, they published their rationale for not recommending masking. They've got 3 paragraphs here, and I'm going to summarize them off to the side. Norway says that surgical masks may be effective, but we would have to do a large-scale nationwide educational program on telling people how to wear them correctly, how often to change them. All of these sorts of things which they did not feel was feasible. Then their second paragraph, they basically say cloth masks have no proof of effectiveness, so why the heck would we do that? And then the third one, which I found just insanely compelling, they said if 200,000 people wore surgical masks properly, it would decrease new cases by 1 per week. That's it.
We're done here.
1 less case per week. Not per day, not death, case per week. I mean, literally, this is what we're being asked to do. All right, now, the New York Times does really give useful information sometimes, and they declared Philippines the mask champions of the world because in the Philippines they have 92% compliance for universal masking, meaning that everyone in the Philippines wears a mask all the time. Somebody forgot to tell coronavirus they're wearing masks all the time. Mexico, our neighbor to the south, 85%. I didn't know Mexicans were that compliant, but apparently they are. We know they have a great work ethic, but apparently they don't mind masks too bad either. Again, same deal. Why do their cases continue to rise? If they're wearing masks all the time, then masks are so important. Play a little name that country. Here's a country where they have a peak in early April, and now the cases are going right up. This country was on that list. Any guesses? Think Asian. Japan. The Japanese were who everyone said is why we all need to wear masks. But again, an island nation, they thought they had it under control. Now they have more cases than they had back in April. I would venture to guess that maybe those 2020 Olympics, who knows, they may not happen. Because what we're seeing is the coronavirus is going to do in a population what it's going to do in a population. And March 31st, that's when their mask mandate countrywide went into effect. Here's another country that's a little bit surprisingly less masky than we are in the U.S. And it's our neighbor to the north, Canada. You would think that they would be more compliant, but Canada does not have a national mask mandate. They've actually done quite well just with social distancing and educating the public on hand hygiene. And this country had a peak back in March and has had very few cases. And I've already mentioned a little bit about this country, but this is Norway. Right now, their schools are open. They're doing social distancing, hand hygiene, but no masks, no lockdowns, and they're doing quite well. Now, I spoke internationally, and then let's talk about locally, local municipalities and states. So these are headlines pulled from about a week and a half ago. Miami-Dade ICU is 146% capacity. Now, Miami-Dade County, they had an indoor mask mandate on April 9th. They doubled down on their mask and said, well, it's not working indoor. We're going to make it outdoor now, too, in Miami. So July 2nd, happy 4th of July weekend, right? Yeah, wear masks. And they've even written this silly ordinance that says if you have more than 10 people in your home and you can't socially distance, you need to wear a mask in your own house. Not kidding. Think about the Karens over there looking in people's yards to see. Oh my God! Call the mayor. They're having a barbecue and they're not wearing their masks. Oh my Lord! And in Los Angeles, May 14th, indoor and outdoor, and this is from July 30th. Over half of the deaths in all of California was from Los Angeles. Almost half the cases were from Los Angeles. Again, if these mask mandates work, how can you possibly explain these numbers? You really can't. I got two case counts here and there, and as you may guess, one state mandates masks, one don't, and there's absolutely no difference in the number of cases. Oregon's in the top, it's masky. Utah's in the bottom, it's not masky. California, They instituted a statewide mask mandate on June the 18th, and their cases continue to go up. They kind of did peak out about earlier in the week. They might be going down. It might be getting better, but it definitely wasn't mask mandate that did it. State of Virginia, one of the few states that has a doctor as their governor. I hear he likes to pick some really interesting Halloween costumes sometimes too. But I digress. Here we go, May the 29th, mask mandate. Wow, it really caused those cases to come down, except everybody else's cases are going up too, and so is Virginia's. Texas, Governor Abbott, he was weak-kneed. He gave in. He passed a mask mandate, and you could almost argue that it looks like the mask mandate worked if it wasn't for that pesky neighbor Republican Governor Doug Ducey, who did not pass a mask mandate in the state of Arizona. It's shocking how similar those two curves look. And it's almost the same effect. So let's talk about the evolution of this debate. In March, CDC, World Health Organization, everybody said healthy people don't need to wear masks. Then in April, said, you know what, universal masking may help. You know, there's a lot of people who are really anxious about this. Maybe it would help if those people who are anxious saw other people around them wearing masks. So let's be good neighbors and make them less anxious. Then in May, it went 100% virtue signaling. Wear a mask so you can show others how you care about them. Yeah. Then the CDC and WHO says universal masking is encouraged and it may, and watch, and I do want you to look at all of those recommendations. May, might, possibly. There is never a definitive word because they choose their words very carefully. Because they are a scientific organization. They don't want to be discredited, because in the end they can say, we just said it might do it. We were wrong, but we didn't say definitively. And then July, it became universal masking must not be questioned. If you do, you are anti-science and you are a bad person. I don't know. I know a lot of really good people who are skeptics. They're probably the best people around, because without those people, you get run over, your rights get taken away. You know, it is just so crazy what we're seeing right now. And here's the question, what is this month going to bring? Funny enough, I answered my own question. Apparently in Panama City right now, there's some Facebook group that a lot of people you would be very surprised to see are members of, trashing local businesses because they see employees wearing masks below their nose, or talking about how there's a table right next to it and it definitely wasn't 6 feet. I mean, this is 1930s Gestapo-style Germany on this issue. And they're letting it happen in America. And the people who are doing it are trying to say, we're the bad people. I say no, they are the bad people. Look, I have never criticized a single person who chose to wear a mask in public. I determined that they have decided that that is what is right for them. But the fact that they feel the right to criticize someone not wearing a mask in public, where do they get off? I don't get it. But the reality is that the science never changed and the politics did. So for all of the maskers out there, what is their designated end point? Are we to wear masks until there's a vaccine that's 100% effective? Well, that's a problem. Fauci just said we might only get a 50% effective vaccine. In that case, COVID may never go away. So is it our hospitals not being overwhelmed? If that's the case, then why did Montana pass a mask mandate? I can tell you that Montana has a Democrat governor. That might have something to do with it. And it wasn't passed through the legislature. Of course, it was passed through executive action. So cases less than what number means we don't have to wear masks. Hospitalizations less than what number means we don't have to wear masks. When we haven't had a certain number of deaths in how many days, we might not have to wear masks. And then the other thing is, when will we have a new study that proves it works? We won't, because they've declared it unethical to ask the question. Thank God for Denmark. And then the million-dollar question, how did Scandinavia do so well without masks if they're truly essential to stopping the spread? And again, these are all questions that any person with intellectual curiosity should be asking. Like, you know, I have a day job. I don't have all the time to do this. We have journalists whose job it is to ask questions. And instead of asking simple questions with data that's available publicly, they want to interview a liberal activist from North Carolina who has started a Facebook group trying to shame people into liberal agendas and wearing masks and all of these sorts of things that for some reason people around us are actively participating and promoting. Very scary times. But wearing a mask can't hurt, right? That was the big argument. No, wearing a mask can't hurt. It's a simple thing. We're not asking you to do it. You know, it can't hurt you. Well, we do know that patients with underlying respiratory and cardiovascular disease could become severely short of breath, especially in the heat and under physical exertion. It can be unsafe. An elderly person could actually pass out while doing this and hit their head and die, for crying out loud. I mean, it can happen. Patients who are hearing impaired, how many times have you been like, say it again? I can't hear what you're saying, and my hearing checks out just fine. I can't imagine our hearing impaired people who either have decreased hearing or who rely on lips for reading. Those people are so socially isolated right now, I can't imagine being one of them. Worsening social isolation and depression. So about 2 months ago, I had a good friend of mine who went to Sam's when you could choose not to wear a mask in Sam's, and she said an elderly gentleman walked up to her and said, "I'm so glad the pretty ladies aren't wearing masks." I mean, there's something out there about you. You might be having a really bad day, and you see a stranger's face, and they're smiling, and it lifts your spirits. If everyone's wearing a mask, where are people getting their spirits lifted? I personally have seen maskne, which is mask-induced acne, mask-induced rosacea, and mask-induced facial dandruff or seborrheic dermatitis. It's actually being reported right now of all of the things that masks are doing to your skin. And then just last week, 2 dentists in Manhattan started talking about mask mouth. Who's heard of mask mouth? Okay, so I would assume everyone in here has worn a mask for an extended period of time during the pandemic. If you haven't, I will let you know, because I have. I'm in a healthcare setting. Patients will complain if we're not. We wear masks. You start breathing out of your mouth because breathing out of your nose becomes difficult. You need a bigger space to breathe out of because it is harder to breathe in and out when you're wearing a mask. It's proven scientific fact. So you become a mouth breather. Your saliva serves a very important purpose. It's antibacterial. So when you're breathing out of your mouth, your saliva dries up. You get dry mouth. Also, when you're wearing a mask during the day, you're less likely to hydrate yourself and drink water. So dry mouth in people who are masking is a real thing. And what dentists are saying is that patients who've never had cavities are coming in with cavities. Patients who've never had gum disease are coming in with horrible gum disease. And there's actually mask breath, which is basically halitosis, and it's from bacterial overgrowth due to less saliva. I bet many people in the room did not know that severe gum disease is associated with cardiac disease. So it's actually not good for you to have oral cavity issues, and it can be bad for your health. So when people are saying, what harm can it do? I've got a list of harm that it can do. And we really should go back looking, was Benjamin Franklin, I don't even know what party he was. Was he a Republican? I don't think the Republicans existed at that point in time. But Benjamin Franklin said it best, and I think if he were alive today, he would certainly be a Republican. But he said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. And we can't do that. That's what we've been doing. We need to take it back. The very last point I want to make is schools are opening in a week and a half. Is it safe for children? I think I've made a good case for children, but I'm just going to reiterate. Less than 50 children under the age of 15 have died from COVID. 169 have already died from a very mild strain of flu this year. If we were going to try to claim that COVID is unsafe for children, we would never be able to open up schools again because mild seasonal flu is worse for children than COVID. Sweden's schools never closed, and this is the graph of the number of coronavirus deaths by age in Sweden. They had 1 death in the 9 and younger age group. They had 0 deaths in the 10 to 19 age group, and then 9 again in the 20 to 29-year-old age group. There are 10 million people in Sweden, and 1 child died of COVID. It is more than safe for children to go back to school. And the German state of Saxony also showed no increased transmission of COVID at schools in children. Is it safe for teachers at school? And this is the million-dollar question. Is it safe? You can make a valid argument that perhaps teachers might not be safe at school. However, Sweden's health agency says to open schools, and it did not spread the pandemic among children. So this goes back to the children argument, but I found it very interesting, the last sentence here. A comparison of the incidence of COVID-19 in different professions suggested no increased risk for teachers. So Sweden basically looked by profession. They said healthcare workers, taxi drivers, public transit people had off-the-chart higher risk, like 4, 5, 6, 7 times risk. Teachers, same risk as the general population, and actually in preschool teachers, it was below risk. A German study looked at the transmission among teachers and students and found similar risks at school versus the general population. And then last, this just came out over the weekend from the United Kingdom. They carried out a study in 100 schools across England that included 20,000 students and teachers. The results of this study are expected to be published later this year, but the head of the study says, a new study that has been done in the United Kingdom schools confirms there is very little evidence that the virus is transmitted in schools. So we have the answer. Teachers are not at risk unless they're in one of those well-defined risk categories. You know, you must have seen my slides because if pediatricians say it's safe, why don't teachers' unions follow the science? And I believe in never trying to come up with a phrase or a catchy term if someone else has already said it better. So when the United Auto Workers walk off the job, does anyone pretend to care? Does anyone pretend that they care about people buying cars? No. No one says, oh, they're striking because of the car buyers. They're trying to help the quality of cars so car buyers can be better. Why do we pretend that teachers' unions strike for children or parents? It's ridiculous. What is the job of the teachers' unions? Take care of the teachers. Unions advocate for policies that require less work, more pay, and benefits. That is what unions do. They do not advocate for students or children. The media just don't want to call it out for what it is. So, I'm going to go to conclusions and then take questions. So my conclusions are that the public health experts got scared, probably due to bad data from China, and abandoned the playbook earlier. Again, more Tom Brady, less James Winston. Lockdowns do slow the spread. I do really think if you're going to lock everyone down and not let them leave their homes, it's undeniable that a hard lockdown does slow the spread of a virus. Now, one thing it does do is it puts a bunch of people indoors, and if one person in that household has COVID, guess what? Everybody in that household is likely to get COVID. But if no one in your household has COVID, it's probably okay, except for the fact that you have to do it for a really, really long time, and as soon as you stop locking down, it comes back. So it is a cure that is worse than the disease because you can't sustain them. Masks may, and again, I follow the term from the CDC because that's about as definitive as you can get. They may slow the spread when the masks are of high quality and when they are worn properly, but they only play a minor role, and without a doubt, mask mandates have no effect on COVID whatsoever. Teachers' unions are not advocating on behalf of parents and students, and the media should stop pretending that they are. And being a skeptic should not be shunned. That is the biggest point I want to say, is being a skeptic and asking questions is part of our scientific process. And it's been obfuscated and really railroaded by the national media, the national scientific community, and even in the medical communities, it has been tough. I was at a meeting of doctors where we were talking about potential treatments, and I said, we need to let our community know about it and not assume that they're all like, I'll tell my patients in the office, but I'm not getting in front of the camera because they're scared to speak out. So, as you guys know, I'm not scared to speak out. I'll say it how it is, but we need more people being skeptical, asking questions, and not blindly trusting that our government leaders have the answers, because they really don't.
And they're listening to the wrong people. So.
Yes.
We have time for a few We have time for a few questions. First one, though, I'm going to take initiative. College football season. Should athletes be playing this fall?
So, I've made fun of Trevor Lawrence a ton over the last 2 years because he's got long hair, but man, did I become a big Trevor Lawrence fan last night when he basically said, this is ridiculous, we need to play college football. Healthy athletes are not at risk. There are probably one or two coaches who may be at risk who maybe should sit the season out. But let players opt out. If a player doesn't want to play, don't make them play. But we should have a season, and I say, let's even let us have some fans. Yes?
My 6-year-old grandson goes to the same school where his mom teaches, and he is fighting wearing a mask to the point of being ballistic, and the principal has says if he won't wear a mask, he can't come to school. Seriously.
Well, I believe there are medical exemptions to wearing a mask, and if you found the right pediatrician to potentially say that he has one of many different conditions. Absolutely. So that falls back to the ADA Act. A school absolutely cannot discriminate based on medical condition, and really and truly, you shouldn't even have to tell the school. Yeah, I know it's silly, but we are where we are for many reasons. Yes.
Is there a greater risk to Afro-Americans? You hear a lot of publicity about that, and a lot of the blacks are very, very nervous.
That is a really interesting question. We do know that socioeconomic status has a huge impact on how quickly you seek medical care. It has a huge impact on what your underlying health conditions are. And we do know that, we know that Black and Hispanic communities do have higher issues when it comes to COVID. I don't know if a study has looked at it independent of socioeconomic and underlying conditions, but I do know that there's always been health disparities when it comes to minority communities, I think their fears should be validated. I think anyone afraid. I mean, look, the media is driving us all to fear. So people are shocked when I tell them, based on your age and your health, you only have like a 0.001 chance of dying if you get COVID, and people are like, no way. And I'm like, yes, look, So anyway, to answer the question, I think educating everyone on their individual risk. I mean, I think we're seeing big time obesity and diabetes is a huge issue. when it comes to that. And we've really missed, I didn't even mention this, we've missed a great chance from a public health perspective to educate people on why they should be healthy, why they should be exercising, why they should be eating right and taking personal responsibility.
Time for one more question.
I'm going to let you pick.
James.
My wife was injured and she couldn't leave the house, so I did all the grocery shopping. I went into the same Publix day after day from the very beginning of this thing till they come out with the mask. The same clerks were there, the same bag boys were there, and none of them disappeared. And I went in there every other day and they were there. If that's true in a Publix, why isn't it true in a public school? And why can't I ask the doctors this question? If we do this, will you guarantee the outcome? They'll never answer that question.
That is right, and I will say that a Swedish study that looked at various sectors did look at grocery store workers and found grocery store workers do not be at increased risk of contracting COVID in the country of Sweden. Oh.
Actually,
Thank you.
thank you so much, Dr. Ward.
Is that available somewhere? I mean, is this information? I know you've done all the hard work, and I do appreciate that. But is this available? So my church, I'd love to do this in my church. I would love to do this to my 85-year-old daddy who is freaking out.
I would be happy to provide that. Maybe I'll send it though.
Yes, yeah. If you'll send it to me, I'll be happy to make it available. And we'll also have a video of this presentation to share. Because I wanted to make sure we're going to start recording our meetings going forward, particularly when we have such great speakers like Dr. Ward, because I know there's a lot of interest in the community for some real information. And again, this is one battle right now for, yes?
I just want to say one thing. My workers wear masks all day, 12 hours a day. It is the most ridiculous, stupidest thing I've ever heard. I've had tables complain that they're not wearing the mask properly. And then I said, where's yours? How are you protecting me? And then they get mad because I don't believe the mask works. My parents are 71 years old. My dad has COPD. My mom has heart issues. They are of course at risk, but they don't walk around in a mask. So why do all of my healthy employees have to walk around in a mask? And why does my 18-year-old senior have to go walk in a mask when she goes to high school? Or I really want to send them without the mask. I want to be that person because they hate me anyway, so it's okay. I'll fight the fight. But they don't work, and why is there no education? And where the hell are our leaders that are going to educate anybody? Why is not one single leader, excuse my language right now, probably don't want to record this, get the balls, stand up and say, you guys are stupid. What are we doing? Why can't we just all pull together and read the right stuff? And then give the right education and stop. When you live in fear, there is no faith.
Amen.
Absolutely. And this is exactly what they don't, right? They do not want citizens capable of critical thought. And what they aren't interested in is science, they're interested in power. Centralized science is not science. It is simply using a modern version of the divine right of kings, right? They think that they have information to some certain knowledge that gives them the authority to rule over us and take away our liberties. And you are not allowed to question them. That is the society they want. They want to hide it by this idea of rule by expert. But again, what we are seeing is our institutions, they are laundering accreditation to push political agendas in the name of science. This is something, it's not just simply COVID, though obviously this is something that is a global tragedy as much as the public policy response as it is the virus itself. But this is true for global warming. This is true for the way that the government took over our diets with the food pyramid on bunk science that helped contribute to a lot of the health problems we have right now. Time and time again, we have seen progressive leadership hijack the mantle of science to use it for their own agendas. And we are the ones that have to fight back to this. It's about individual power, questioning, being skeptical of those elites. because again, the history does not do them well. So again, since we had such a great talk tonight, we're going to wrap it up there. I know we're a little bit late on schedule. I do want to make one notice though. We have a new addition to our Bay County Republican operations here with Mr. Doug Sanders, who's with the Trump Victory Team.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate it. That was good. It's the first time I've been to the round table meeting here. So I'm a weekend, and I wake up every day that I'm employed by the president. So I'm the field organizer for Bay County. So a weekend, got a lot of emails and phone calls from everybody from Tallahassee all the way to the big house. And really my job is to try and organize everybody who wants to volunteer. So if you know anybody or can reach out in your circle of influence to anybody that wants to spend an hour a week, 2 hours a week, we need phone calls, knocking on doors, events, staffing, things like that. So I'm trying to put all that together. If you know anybody, please stop by the office on Lisenby, 1607, I believe is the address. So stop by there, leave your name and email address. I'll get in contact with you. I'm kind of making it up as I go. There's certain guidelines that everybody has or advice and things like that, but I also have my own advice too. And you know, I'm doing everything I can to get our president reelected again. And that's my part. So if you can volunteer, please stop by there. I'll leave some of my cards here at the front on your way out, but call me anytime. I'm going to try and set up training and meetings on Wednesdays and get us out in the public and do what the Democrats aren't doing. Thank you.
Please ask your neighbors, please talk to family members. We know we have a lot of people that have been up in the air, that changed addresses the last few years because of Hurricane Michael and everything else. We need to make sure the information is up to date. We have to make sure we get every voter out. Bay County is going to be a red county, but every vote that we can collect here is one that cancels out something from South Florida. And again, if Bay County turned out, if we didn't have Hurricane Michael, we wouldn't have Nikki Fried as agricultural commissioner right now. And there's no bigger tyrant in the state of Florida government right now than Nikki Fried. Last of the
4 years ago, 1 out of every 4 Republicans did not go to the polls. That means you know a Republican who lives next door to you or across the street who didn't vote. We need to get that number up. We're going to win Bay County. That's never been in doubt. We need more Republicans to go. We can't let 1 in 4 stay home.
Absolutely. That being said, this has been the Republican Roundtable. Thank you guys so much for spending your Monday night with us. We hope you'll be back in the future.